But John, I can't believe I'm asking this question, but is it actually possible to defeat an enemy that refuses to say that it's defeated?
So this goes to you can't defeat an idea. Like you can't fight. This is that counterterrorism theory that you can't defeat an idea this way. Who says that anybody's trying to defeat the Hamas ideology at this moment? You have a nation who is trying to remove a government from power and destroy its military capabilities. You deal with the radicalization of the ideal that has been there and fueled. I don't know if people have seen the Palestinian Sesame Street, have seen the UNRWA school books of Hamas. So that ideal, which I understand, like this has been like, well, you can't do it this way. You're like, okay, tell me historically how any enemy of any similarity has been defeated by what? Giving them something? No, you have to move forward and take away their will to believe that they can achieve victory. There are lots of ideals that are still around. Nazism, ISIS, all these people, they don't have a autonomous region that they call their nation. They don't have armies, and they definitely don't have the ability to launch attacks against another nation at this moment, depending on what group we're talking
John,
about.
so if you're advising the Israeli government about what they ought to do from here, how will this conflict end? How should it end? How should they proceed from here, in your opinion?
Sure. So again, if you study war, I get this, be a forecaster for us. How long is this going to take? How will this end? Look, if you study war, you know that there is no prediction. It's uncertain, it's political, and it's human. I don't give recommendations to nations. I've definitely helped people with understanding the context and the baseless arguments. It ends with the defeat of Hamas as the political power in Gaza. That can happen in many ways. Yes, the population in Gaza can rise up, and that there are portions that are doing that. You can have other powers in Gaza, Palestinian powers, that could rise up and seize power. You could have the complete unilateral surrender of Hamas. It might be unlikely, but the Hamas fighters, and again, success. You just last week had Hamas fighters surrendering in large amounts because Israel was at their doors. And this is the sanctuary part, that Israel has left portions of Gaza untouched. 25% not touched once, out of concern for these hostages and the difficulty of moving the civilians out of those areas, like Western Gaza City and other areas, or Eastern Gaza. But the ideal, so what's the recommendation? Of course, Israel cannot not fight the narratives, right? When you have a hashtag that's going viral and you have these influencers talking stupid, the only way you fight stupid is with actual credible information, although some people won't view it as credible. If somebody was doing this different, again, take Israel out of the equation, and I've seen this even in India, Pakistan recently, in other wars that are very recent, you have to communicate daily what's going on and what you're doing. You have to have a military person communicating every day. This is what our military is doing. This is the goal. You have to have a political apparatus, right? So Israel, right criticism doesn't have a spokesman for the Israeli government who is daily giving the communication. I was telling somebody recently about Kogat, right? Kogat is the IDF arm that has been facilitating all the aid, the water, the medicine. They didn't even know what the organization was, let alone that it puts out daily information about all the things that Israel is doing to help the civilians. So Israel, in order to continue this war, and they're in debate as we're talking about deciding to go into that last 25% to move the civilians into the south under this crazy constraints that they have to fight the war. And then you have a United Nations session later in September that's going to, of course, say a lot of awful things. I would hope Israel changes its PR strategy, communicates more on a day-to-day basis. You can't wait until after something has gone viral and after nefarious actors start putting pictures of children trying to make stories about what Israel is intending to do rather than what it's actually saying and actually doing in Gaza. And then I would hope, again, if you were to move the entire population of 2 million people into a area that Hamas can't get to them, you could end this war relatively quickly. I wouldn't say very quickly, because Hamas would have lost its center of gravity, which is the use of the population, not just as a shield, but the humanitarian suffering in every aspect that they're doing. But if you're asking me for a prediction of how this war will go, I cannot give you that. And absolutely, again, this isn't Bibi, the prime minister of Israel. If you understand the politics of Israel, he has to maintain a coalition. It isn't like our system where he can be president for 4 years and just make all these decisions over the military, all these things. He has to face votes of no confidence regularly and has to keep a coalition. But the Israeli society could decide very soon that, look, the costs are too much. I know that we have the just goals that we have, but we don't want to pay the price in the loss of soldiers, in the hostages, what they're doing to the hostages, which is awful. That's what a democracy does. It makes that decision. So there is nobody who can tell you how this is going. I, as a John Spencer, with just my personal opinion, think it's insane that you should say Israel should have stopped. It's not achieving its goals, because that's not true. And if you're saying that about Israel, every democracy that ever fights a war, especially for its actual defense of its nation on its borders, will not be able to going forward.
Hey, quick break from the main video. If you're finding value in these videos and want to support the channel, I've just launched memberships here on Culture Wolf. It's a simple way to help keep these videos and conversations going, and as a member, you'll get a few exclusive extras and early access to new content. There are 2 tiers to choose from, and every bit of support means I can keep making the thoughtful videos you come here for. If you're interested, just hit the join button below, or check out the membership introduction video for all the details. Alright, let's jump back in.
Will not be able to going forward.
Well, this is why I say that I'm just shocked at the PR approach from the Israeli leadership, because, no offense, John, but you saying these things doesn't really cut through the same way as if Prime Minister Netanyahu was sitting there and making these same arguments to our audience. Like, I'm just shocked at the fact that they're not pursuing a communication strategy of actually telling people what it is that they're doing and why, because in that vacuum, you are getting all of these narratives that you talk about being perpetrated with no pushback. And it creates a media conversation about this that I think is completely divorced from reality. But I have to say, I put the blame on that for the people whose job it is to communicate about this.
That's a fair criticism. Although, I like to say that, some of these people that you talk to, again, I'm as pro-truth. I bleed red, white, and blue. I'm an American. I am pro-truth because I understand why it matters for the rest of the world, every other democracy. And criticism is absolutely, but when you try to balance criticism with like, yeah, but they're doing all these things wrong, like demanding perfection. So even in its information operations, when it has communicated and nobody is reporting on those communications, when it reports COGAT, again, daily, gives out what they're doing to alleviate civilian harm, nobody cares. And the prime minister absolutely has communicated the goals repeatedly, has communicated that their war is not with the people of Gaza repeatedly. But you have people like, well, I don't care about that. This is what they're doing. This is the effects of their operations, which is insane. Or even, I think one of the greatest spokesmen that Israel has is Minister of Strategic Affairs Dermer, who was the U.S. and the Israeli ambassador to the U.S. He has communicated on multiple podcasts and multiple interviews. This is what our goal is. This is what our goal is not. This is, of course, we have the right, we are trying to alleviate the harm to civilians, all these things. You need to do better than that, of course. But there's also people who don't want to hear, right? Who they invite on their shows. Yes, you, and I know you would love to have some of these interviews, and I hope that they happen. But there are people who aren't listening to even the things that are being said. And this is what I have a problem with, is like, you say because Israel in the beginning of the war said that it wanted to destroy Hamas, that Hamas are animals, that it wanted to not do anything to help Hamas, it wanted to destroy Hamas, that's genocidal intent. That's insane, let alone what militaries say about the other military they're fighting. But then you want to rule out everything that Israeli leadership has said about not wanting to harm the people of Gaza, not wanting to starve the people of Gaza. And then you take the radical political figures and say, yeah, but this guy said it. Smotrich said this. Blimgevir said that. Like, I don't know about the UK system, but that's like taking Marjorie Taylor Greene's statements or some other crazy some other people statements and saying like that's the policy of the United States. That again, that's a double standard. That's trying to demonize the entire nation of Israel. And then this is the whole double standards game that is a part of this
I
whole
mean, I guess
conversation.
let's push back on that. So I take your
Yeah.
point there, John, but they would say, well, look, the finance minister has said these awful things, right? If Netanyahu doesn't do anything about it, he's effectively condoning it. Why has he not come out and said, this is unacceptable? The minister has been forced to resign. We are at war, but we do not use this type of language or rhetoric.
And Marjorie Taylor Greene, I think, A, you were right to describe her as crazy. You didn't need to correct yourself. But B, she's not in the cabinet, right?
Yeah.
There's a big difference.
Same thing with Smotrich is not in the war cabinet. He has not been the person who's been making the decision. So I agree with you. I would have approached people making statements very differently in a wartime situation when you are Israel. But you want to criticize the political leaders of Israel for being political. So this is, again, we try to apply our political framework on a nation like Israel, which is a vibrant democracy with a vibrant left and a vibrant right. And that the fact that Israel does have to keep a coalition, and the prime minister of Israel does, I'm sure, and I think that's a correct inference to say he does want to maintain a coalition and manage the government of Israel because he believes it's in the best interest of the security of the nations. Now, when you impose personal motives on somebody without data, and what I say is, in God I trust, all others bring data. So yes, it's a right criticism. You should come out against that minister, whoever it is, for saying that thing, although it's not what he said, it's how what he said can be framed. So I absolutely support somebody saying, I want to destroy all members of Hamas. I want to take over the control of Gaza. Like, that's what militaries do when they're invaded and attack into a different territory. You take the power from the other government. It's how it's being, any statement, because there are a few statements coming out, are framed. It doesn't matter what they say after that. It's just, I'm going to take that little tidbit. Yes, you would think you'd learn, like, stop saying, keep your mouth shut. But if you want to criticize Israel's political leaders for being political, as in trying to keep a coalition separate of the just, reasonable, what every other nation would do for the goals of the war, then I have a little bit of pushback on that. On if you understand that the prime minister of Israel has to maintain a coalition, or if not, the government falls, and then you have to have an opposition leader, all these things, then that's just not being reasonably and objective. But when you put ulterior motives on people's intent, then I have a problem with that.